Hello and welcome to my channel. So today I'll be showing you how to cut a cut together calf sleeve or a continuous calf sleeve. So I'll be making use of a half length bodice and a waist dart to achieve this. So this line is going to serve as the shoulder line or the starting line. Next I'm going to take the vertical measurements. So from the shoulder to the bust point is 10 inches and to the under bust is 13.5 inches and to the waist is 16 inches. So I'm going to extend the markings with a line. So I'm going to label this bust point and this is the under bust. So I'll move over to the shoulder. So half of the shoulder measurement is 7 inches. I'm going to drop down by 1 inch for the shoulder slant. So for the neck width, I'm going to work with 3.5 inches. So the depth of the neck is also going to be 3.5 inches. And I'll place my curve like this and connect to get the curve. Then with my ruler, I'm going to connect from this point to the shoulder slant. So from this shoulder line, I will be marking my armhole depth or my chest line. So the armhole depth I'm working with is 8 inches. So I'm going to connect with a straight line to meet with the 8 inches. But before I do that, I'll also make sure I have 7.5 inches here. So this is where the 7.5 inches stop. Then I'm going to connect with my ruler. So this will now be our chest line. So the next thing I'm going to do is to impute the dart. So before I do that, I'll take the bust pan measurement divided by 2 plus ½ inch, which is 4 inches. So I'm going to mark 4 inches all the way to the waist. And I'm going to connect with a straight line. So for the dart on the waist, I'm going to take ½ inch on this side and ½ inch on this side. And I'll be connecting to the bust point. I connect here also to the bust point. So the next thing I'll do is to impute the horizontal measurement. So on the chest line, I'm going to impute quarter of the bust circumference, which is 10 inches plus 2 inches seam allowance. So that will give me 12 inches. And on the under bust, I'll impute quarter of the under bust circumference, which is 8 inches. And this dart allowance, I have 3/4 of an inch plus 2 inches seam allowance. So that will be 2 3/4. And on the waist, I'm going to impute quarter of the waist circumference, which is 8.5 inches, and I have a 1 inch dart allowance here plus 2 inches seam allowance, so that will give me 3 inches. So I'm going to connect this marking. So the next thing I'm going to do is to create the armhole. So I'm going to measure what I have here, which is 8 inches. So I'm going to mark the midpoint 4 inches, and on the 4 inches I'm going to come inwards by ½ of an inch. Then I'm going to connect to the chest line. So the next thing now is to draft the calf sleeve. So on this shoulder slant, I'll be extending this line, just like this. And on this line, I'll measure 3.5 inches. So this is going to serve as the sleeve length. So you could choose to work with any desired length of your choice. And on this marking here, I'll step down by 1.5 inches, which is here. And with my curve, I'll connect from this shoulder point to this marking here. So from here, I'll be connecting to this armhole curve. So you could decide to give your sleeve any shape. So I'm going to go with the first shape. I'm going to make use of a different marker so we could see the different shapes we could achieve. So you could achieve something like this. So for this, I went this way, but now I'm going to invert the curve this way. So I'm going to get something like this. So you just feel free to play along with your design. So I have two shapes here. You could decide to go along with the first one. You could decide to go along with the second one. So before you cut out, you need to add ½ inch seam allowance all the way and stop at this point. So if you don't want to add your ½ inch seam allowance on your pattern paper, you could go ahead and do that directly on your fabric. So our front panel is ready, and I'm going to cut this out. So we're done with the front panel. Next, I'll move over to the back panel. So for the back, I have a zipper allowance of 1 inch here. I've gone ahead to impute the vertical measurement, and I've also imputed the dart. So the next thing I'm going to do is to impute the shoulder measurement, and I'll step down by 1 inch for the shoulder slant. The neck width is 3.5 inches. So your neck width for your front and your back panel should always be the same thing. So the neck width is 3.5 inches, and the neck depth will be 2 inches. So I'll connect. So I'm going to connect from here to get the shoulder slant. So from this point, I'm going to impute my armhole depth, which is 8 inches. I'll draw a straight line to connect. So this is now the chest line. So I'm going to impute the horizontal measurement. So on the chest line, quarter of the bust circumference is 10 inches plus 2 inches seam allowance. And on the underbust, quarter of the underbust circumference is 8 inches. And I'm going to replace this dart, which is 3/4 of an inch plus 2 inches seam allowance. So that's 2 3/4. And on the waist, I have 8.5 inches as quarter of the waist circumference plus 1 inch dart and 2 inches seam allowance. So that will give me 3 inches here. So the next thing I'm going to do is to connect the markings. So if you notice, the dart at the back panel, I came up on the bust point by 1 inch. So the front panel, I started on the bust point, but for the back panel, you have to come up by 1 inch on the bust point. So for the armhole, I'll simply use my curve to connect all the way to this point. So like I did for the front, I'll be extending the shoulder slant. And on this line, I'm going to mark 3.5 inches. So the 3.5 inches is for the sleeve length, and I'll be stepping down by 1.5 inches from the 3.5 inches. So I have my 1.5 inches here. Now I'll take my curve this way, and I'll connect from here to the 1.5 inches mark. So I've gotten the sleeve length. The next thing I'm going to do is to take this way, just like I did for the front, and I'll connect like this. So I'll simply use my hand to blend. So this is what I have. So like I said before, you could create any sleeve opening of your choice. So we're done with the back panel. So also go ahead to add your seam allowance all through before you cut out or on your fabric directly. So the next thing I'm going to do is to cut this out. So as you can see, I have both panels here. I have the back panel and I have the front panel. So the next thing you need to do is to place them on top of each other to make sure that you have the same thing. So you can see that my sleeves are matching up, and as usual, I have the back armhole here and the front armhole. So that brings us to the end of this video. Thank you for watching. So guys, I hope this video was helpful to someone out there. Please like, share and subscribe to support my channel.